Mia Jenkins spent 5 years proving her worth at a top Chicago law firm, only to be denied a well-earned promotion with the excuse of not fitting the company culture. Her boss, David Hunt, a man who saw diversity as a threat, thought he could quietly crush her career with lies and intimidation. But fate had a twist in store. Anonymous emails exposed the racist truth behind his actions, sending shockwaves through the courtroom. And trust me, you'll want to hear how this battle for justice ended with a victory no one saw coming. Mia Jenkins, a 28-year-old African-American woman, had built a reputation as one of the brightest stars in a top-tier law firm in downtown Chicago. She wasn't just another associate buried under paperwork. She was sharp, ambitious, and relentless. Traits that made her both respected and quietly envied. Over 5 years of long nights, tough cases, and corporate maneuvering, Mia had positioned herself as a frontrunner for a long-overdue promotion to senior counsel. It was finally supposed to be her moment. The conference room was filled with department heads, all gathered for the quarterly announcement of promotions. Mia sat with a mix of anticipation and calm confidence, her polished demeanor masking the storm of hope inside her. This promotion wasn't just a title for her, it was validation. The culmination of every time she'd fought through implicit biases, condescending remarks, and the subtle but ever-present whispers that she was somehow lucky to be where she was. David Hunt, the firm's managing partner, entered the room with his usual air of smug authority. Middle-aged, white, and with an ego inflated by decades of unchecked power, he didn't even bother to acknowledge Mia as he began rattling off names. His voice was monotone, businesslike, until he reached the final announcement. Congratulations to our new senior counsel, Evan Bradley. The room froze. Mia's stomach dropped as if she'd been punched. Evan Bradley, that junior associate who barely had 3 years at the firm? The same Evan who once mixed up 2 key plaintiffs in a case briefing and had her quietly cover for him? David, as if sensing the tension, smiled faintly and added, "We believe Evan is the best fit for senior counsel, given his alignment with our firm's culture." Mia felt a surge of heat rise to her face. Firm culture? What the hell is that supposed to mean? Her mind raced as she dissected the coded language in his words. Everyone knew what culture fit was, a polite euphemism for not rocking the boat, not too different, and in cases like this, not too black. She scanned the faces around her. Colleagues avoided her gaze like cowards, as if her fury might infect them through eye contact. Some looked down at their notes, others fidgeted awkwardly. No one dared to speak up. No one ever did when David Hunt was in control. The room was suffocating. David continued on, oblivious or indifferent to the damage his words had caused. He barely even glanced at her. The dismissal was surgical, clean, swift, and deeply dehumanizing. Mia clenched her fists under the table, her nails digging into her palms. The rage was blinding. This wasn't just about a promotion. It was about every time she'd been told to tone it down, to play the game, to wait her turn. It was about the countless microaggressions and backhanded compliments disguised as advice from people like David, who never had to prove themselves the way she did. She couldn't sit there another second. Without a word, she pushed back her chair, the scrape echoing louder than intended. All eyes darted toward her. For a fleeting moment, she saw pity in a few faces, but it only fueled her anger. Pity was useless. She didn't need their sympathy. Mia stormed out of the room, heels clicking furiously against the polished floor. As soon as the heavy conference door swung shut behind her, she let out a shaky breath, her vision still blurred with rage. Culture fit? The words kept reverberating in her skull like a cruel joke. It wasn't just an excuse, it was a weapon, one that had been wielded against countless people like her in every industry. But this time, they had picked the wrong person. Mia knew she couldn't just walk away and let David Hunt get away with it. That smug smile of his, the cowardice of her colleagues, and the sickening phrase, culture fit, echoed relentlessly in her mind. Enough was enough. She had worked too hard to let systemic bias define her fate. Within days, she reached out to a civil rights attorney, Kendra Lewis, a fierce advocate with a reputation for dismantling corporate giants. Kendra didn't mince words after hearing Mia's story. "This is classic," Kendra said, leaning back in her chair. "Textbook racial discrimination. They're relying on that vague, bullshit excuse about a culture to justify blocking your promotion. But we need proof. Mia nodded, her jaw tightening. I'll do whatever it takes. This can't keep happening. Not to me, not to anyone else. Kendra advised her to file an official complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, the federal agency responsible for investigating workplace discrimination. The process was slow and bureaucratic, but Mia was determined. As the case gained momentum, the firm caught wind of her actions. David Hunt's response was as ruthless as it was predictable. 2 weeks later, she received a cold, impersonal email. Effective immediately, your employment with the firm has been terminated due to unsatisfactory performance and repeated violations of corporate policies. Mia sat in shock, reading the email over and over. Violations? Unsatisfactory performance? She had flawless performance reviews. Everyone knew she was one of the firm's most valuable attorneys. This wasn't just retaliation. It was a calculated assassination of her professional reputation. David wanted to crush her credibility before the case could go public. Her initial shock soon turned to fury. She forwarded the email to Kendra, who called within minutes. Retaliation, clear as day, Kendra said, her voice sharp. This is illegal. We'll hit them with another charge, but it's going to get ugly, Mia. They'll fight dirty. And fight dirty they did. At the first court hearing, David arrived with a team of high-powered lawyers who oozed arrogance. His legal team crafted a narrative designed to paint Mia as a volatile, unprofessional employee. They claimed she had a history of insubordination, conflicts with colleagues, and poor performance, a complete fabrication. David took the stand with calm detachment, his expression almost bored as he denied any wrongdoing. Mia Jenkins was a challenging employee, he said, voice steady and patronizing. Her work ethic was inconsistent, and she often disregarded company protocols. It's unfortunate that she's chosen to misinterpret a standard business decision as something discriminatory. Mia sat in the courtroom, clenching her fists under the table. The lies were piling up, and she felt the weight of them crushing her. She knew David was counting on the court to believe him, to view her as another angry black woman who was bitter over losing a promotion. But just when things seemed at their bleakest, a twist of fate shifted the entire case. One evening, as Mia was reviewing documents with Kendra, her phone buzzed with an anonymous email. The subject line read, "Truth will set you free." Mia's heart raced as she opened it. Inside were a series of screenshots and attachments, emails between David Hunt and several senior partners. In one email, David casually wrote, "Mia's been getting too ambitious. We need to manage expectations before she gets the wrong idea about her place here." Another read, "A diversity hire should know better than to think she can climb to the top. We'll let her down gently with this culture-fit excuse." Mia's breath caught in her throat. The blatant racism was spelled out in black and white. These weren't just offhand comments. They were strategic discussions on how to block her advancement. Kendra leaned over her shoulder, reading the messages with growing disbelief. This is it," Kendra whispered. "This is the smoking gun." More messages followed, each one more damning than the last. There were even references to coordinating her eventual dismissal once she became too much of a liability. "Where did these come from?" Mia asked, still stunned. "Doesn't matter," Kendra replied with a fierce smile. "What matters is that we now have undeniable proof. They can't spin their way out of this." The next day, the emails were submitted as evidence. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Mia watched as David's smug composure cracked for the first time. His face flushed as the emails were read aloud in court. Gasps echoed through the room. Reporters furiously scribbled notes, and the judge's expression darkened with disapproval. David stammered under cross-examination, trying to claim the emails were taken out of context. But it was too late. The truth was laid bare, and his credibility was in tatters. For the first time since this nightmare began, Mia felt a surge of hope. The tide had finally turned. The courtroom was packed as the evidence hearing resumed. Journalists, legal observers, and curious onlookers filled every seat, eager to see what would unfold. The atmosphere was tense, as though the air itself buzzed with anticipation. Mia sat at the plaintiff's table, her eyes locked on David Hunt, whose confident facade was starting to show cracks. He knew what was coming. Kendra Lewis, Mia's attorney, approached the witness stand with the precision of a predator. She held a stack of papers in her hand, a smug yet controlled smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. In the crowd, murmurs rippled. Word had already spread that today's hearing would feature something explosive. "Your Honor," Kendra began, her voice steady and commanding, "we have new evidence that directly contradicts the defendant's testimony regarding his motives for Miss Jenkins's dismissal and the denial of her promotion." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His attorney leaned in, whispering something, but David waved him off with a nervous glance. He was trying to maintain his composure, but the sweat on his brow betrayed him. Kendra paced slowly, allowing the tension to build. Then, she pulled out the first document, a printed email from David's internal correspondence. "I'd like to direct the court's attention to this email," Kendra said, holding it up. "It's from Mr. Hunt to a senior partner, dated 3 months before Miss Jenkins's promotion was blocked. I'll read it aloud for the record. Mia's been getting too ambitious. We need to manage expectations before she gets the wrong idea about her place here." The room went silent for a moment before erupting in a wave of gasps and whispered disbelief. Mia's heart pounded in her chest. Hearing those words aloud hit like a slap, even though she'd read them before. David's lawyer objected, claiming the email was out of context, but the judge dismissed the objection with a wave of his hand. "Continue, Miss Lewis," the judge said, his tone cold and impatient. Kendra nodded and moved to the next email. This one was sent shortly before Miss Jenkins was fired. It reads, "A diversity hire should know better than to think she can climb to the top. We'll let her down gently with this culture-fit excuse. Keeping people like her on top-tier positions is dangerous." The courtroom erupted. Reporters furiously jotted down notes as spectators whispered in outrage. Even the judge's usually stoic expression hardened. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes at David. David looked pale now, his jaw clenched, as if he were trying to swallow the words back down. Kendra turned to him, her voice sharp and cutting. "Mr. Hunt, these emails were sent from your company account. Are you denying that you wrote them?" David hesitated, eyes darting around the courtroom as though searching for an escape route. He finally stammered, I don't recall sending those. It could be, I don't know, taken out of context." "Out of context?" Kendra repeated, her voice laced with incredulity. "Do you expect this court to believe that these blatantly discriminatory statements are somehow misunderstood?" David's attorney objected again, but it was too late. The damage was done. Everyone in that room, including the judge, could see the truth. The judge addressed David directly. "Mr. Hunt, your electronic signature is present on these communications. Whether or not you recall sending them, the evidence is clear. I strongly advise you to cooperate fully as this investigation proceeds." David swallowed hard, his face now devoid of any color. He looked cornered, his once unshakable arrogance reduced to a feeble attempt at damage control. Outside the courtroom, the media storm was already in full swing. Reporters broke the story within minutes. Headlines blasted across social media, racist emails, exposed corruption in elite law firm, corporate discrimination unveiled in court drama, and David Hunt faces backlash over racist remarks. Support for Mia swelled overnight. Activists organized protests outside the firm's headquarters, demanding justice not just for her, but for every employee who had ever faced similar discrimination. People from all walks of life shared her story across platforms, turning her case into a national conversation about workplace inequality. #West Stand with Maya began trending, with messages pouring in from across the country. "This is bigger than me," Mia whispered to herself that night as she scrolled through messages of support. Her story had become a rallying cry. David Hunt's empire of lies was crumbling, and for the first time in her career, Mia felt the weight of systemic oppression start to lift. Not because of pity or charity, but because of raw, undeniable truth. The courtroom erupted in applause as the judge declared a verdict in Mia's favor, recognizing the firm's actions as clear discrimination and retaliation. David Hunt was finished. His career shattered and his reputation in ruins. The firm was ordered to pay a hefty settlement, but for Mia, this was about far more than money. Outside the courthouse, Mia faced a sea of cameras and supporters. She took a deep breath and spoke with conviction. This is not just my victory. It's for everyone who's been silenced and told they don't belong. We must keep fighting and supporting each other. That's how we change the system." The crowd cheered as she announced the formation of the Jenkins Foundation for Workplace Justice. Within months, her organization became a beacon of hope, offering legal aid and support to workers across the country. Mia's story inspired thousands to stand up against discrimination. She had turned her pain into power and her fight into a movement that would leave a lasting legacy.